Hey guys, Spud here, as always. And I know I've been gone for a while, and I know a lot of you guys have been missing my content. And I've been gone just simply because I had an extremely busy holiday season, and then in January and February I had a number of premium flying opportunities for the airline I work for that I really just couldn't pass up. But that said, today we're taking a look at how to tune the DCS AI in order to make more fun, engaging, and far more realistic air-to-air combat scenarios. From beyond visual range all the way to the merge, whether you're flying in the Cold War or the modern era. For this video, we're going to be coming at it from the perspective of an East versus West type of scenario, because I believe most of you guys out there are probably flying your Hornet, Tomcat, or Viper against all manner of MiGs and Sukhois. But if you're a MiG-29 pilot, a lot of this stuff will apply to your mission making as well. And of course, if you guys like this video and you get a bunch out of it, we can go into how to make things like SAM traps, giraffe attacks, and more in subsequent videos. Just let me know in the comments down below. Also, I put a cheat sheet of the AI options that I believe are essential in the show notes and pinned in the comments down below, just in case this video is a little too long for you. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright guys, we're starting our demonstration on how you can create more fun, realistic, and immersive air-to-air scenarios here on the main screen here. So of course we're going to have to open up the mission editor. And when it comes to creating these more realistic air-to-air scenarios, it's all about tuning and constraining the default DCS AI to make the AI less aggressive, less suicidal, and less UFO-y when it comes to their flight model. And there's a whole bunch of options you may not have considered that will allow you to do this. So we'll start off here by placing our player-controlled aircraft for our demonstration today, and that's going to be an FA-18 air starting somewhere down here on the Musandam Peninsula. And please keep in mind, guys, that for today we are doing a very simplified kind of scenario here, so that way you guys can get some building blocks that then you can apply to your more complex scenarios, whether that be in single player or in multiplayer. So of course we're going to have to add a cool skin to our FA-18 here. In this case, a Royal Daimar Marine Corps skin that I recently updated. That is available for everybody to enjoy on my Discord. And of course we'll add an air-to-air focus loadout to our aircraft. That's going to be a whole bunch of AMRAAMs here, a lightning pod on the center line, and a couple of Sidewinders. Now, we're also going to add an additional waypoint that we want our aircraft to be pointed towards and flying towards as we air start up here somewhere near Kesham Island. And that's going to start to set up where we'd like to have our little simplified air-to-air combat scenario occur, which is going to be somewhere out here in the middle of the Straits of Hormuz area. Now it's time to start setting up our enemy AI that we're then going to tune to make more realistic and fun to fly against. So I'll just click on our original kind of flight here that we've set up. I'm going to hit Control-C and Control-V on my keyboard here in order to save some time and make sure that I keep some additional properties such as my altitude and speed options here for the air start of our bad guy units here. So first off, we're going to need to change the country over to a red country. I typically like to just go ahead and use the combined task forces red and blue. And this just makes things super easy because it basically takes all of the units in DCS and all of the skins in DCS and all of the weapons and just throws them into either a red bucket or a blue bucket. So that way you can just very easily pick whatever units you need for the scenario you're creating without having to worry about which unit belongs to which country or which skin belongs to which country, weapons, etc. So that's typically what I like to do. Now, when it comes to the task for our unit here, this is incredibly important to have this set correctly. when it comes to creating that more realistic, immersive air-to-air combat experiences, I highly recommend you have this set to cap or combat air patrol, because setting the task to cap gives you some additional options down here in the advanced waypoint actions tab, where we actually go to tune the AI and constrain it to allow the AI to behave more realistically and more fun, in my opinion. Next, of course, we're going to set the type over to a MiG-29. So once again, we'll search 29 there to populate all of our MiG-29 options. I'm going to go for the original Flaming Cliffs MiG-29A model here, and that's simply because I think the original Flaming Cliffs AI models tend to listen to the constraints and options that we set a little bit better than the full fidelity MiG-29 used as an AI. But your mileage will definitely vary and things will be updated and changed within the back end of DCS, no problem. For the skill level, of course we need to change that. We don't want to have it player controlled for today. I typically like to have my flight leads set to either veteran or trained, and then my wingman and section leads set to one step below, whether trained or rookie. So we'll set our flight lead here to veteran. That should work out for us today. We're not going to select the number of additional aircraft in the flight just yet, and I'll show you guys why in just a moment here. Moving on down, we're going to adjust the loadout that is on our aircraft. So we'll go for, of course, an air-to-air focus loadout. And of course, we're going to make sure that we have an external fuel tank on our aircraft here. And that's very important to allow us to better constrain the flight profile and performance of the AI. And we'll talk about that in just a second here. For the skin, I'm going to set it over to the Piran Air Force standard skin that we use for our fictional bad guys in the Burning Sands campaign universe. Next, now that we have the payload set for our AI aircraft, we can start to add in our additional units. So for today, we're going to go for a 2-ship, and we'll set the skill for our wingman over to trained here. Now, of course, you'll find what you like to set for the skill level of the AI as you play with different things and see how they interact with your players and the skill level of your players for your multiplayer missions and all that good stuff. But the reason why I wait to set the number of units once I have the payload set is so that way I don't have to go back and double up resetting the payloads and things manually. Going back over to the waypoints tab here, this is where the magic happens, of course, when it comes to constraining and tuning the AI for those more fun, realistic, and immersive air-to-air combat scenarios. So we're going to need to make sure that we have a waypoint selected that we're going to use for our point where we want all of our tuning to come into play. In this case, I'm going to set it to waypoint 0, where our MiG-29s are going to air start. But if, say, you're creating a whole large immersive mission, you may want to have this waypoint set further down the line in case, say, you had your MiGs take off and fly to a waypoint, another waypoint, and then you want them to engage your players or yourself in single player, things of that nature. Now, next, we have the task set to cap like we talked about earlier, and this will auto-populate an option down here in the Advanced Waypoint Actions tab called Cap A. This is essentially Cap A reference. This is a slew of default options of how the AI will behave when you have the task set to cap. We always, always, always want to delete this right off the bat. Once you delete that right off the bat, the AI is no longer going to have that kind of like omnipresent brain and situational awareness where they can basically see everything on the map, fly across the entire map, and shoot at anything they see. And this is very important. Making the AI more realistic is all about constraining the AI, making them less aggressive, making them less suicidal when it comes to actually engaging player aircraft, whether single player or multiplayer. Now, it's also important to note here on the additional waypoint property or advanced waypoint actions tab down here, the AI will go through each and every option from top to bottom, from 1 down to 5 here in this initial list. So we need to ensure that our most important things we want to have set for the AI are up at the top of the list and the least important things down at the bottom. One thing that is auto-populated by default in DCS is air-to-air missile attack ranges. We need to edit that, and I like to have this set to max range launch. This is because in my missions, I like my pilots to have to come up with and fly a BVR timeline in their minds and work with the AICs or the TAC-C2 in order to fly through that BVR timeline and get a really realistic experience out of it against enemy MiGs that don't necessarily want to always die and don't necessarily always want to get to the merge. So having the AI launch their long-range or medium-range air-to-air missiles right off the bat, as far as they possibly can, really pushes us towards that goal when it comes to that air-to-air combat experience in my missions. So we're definitely going to have that set. And there's a slew of other options here that are populated by default that are very important to have, and you really don't need to change any of these other than air-to-air missile attack ranges. So now it's all about adding additional options. The first and most important option is where do we want our enemy MiGs to actually search for targets and engage those targets. So this is very important for constraining that AI, so that way they're not just flying around the map willy-nilly, shooting at the first thing they see, because maybe you want the MiGs to engage one set of players, but not these players over here, or you want them to defend this piece of airspace, but not care so much about that piece of airspace over there. So we're going to go over to type. We're going to set perform en route task. For the action, we're going to say search, then engage in zone. We can see on the map here, this populates a little zone here that we can then click and drag. And I'm going to click and drag this down to the area where I want my MiGs to search for player-controlled aircraft or blue AI and then engage them. We're then going to change the zone radius. I tend to think that about 200,000 will work out well for today. Now you can do the math for what the diameter of a radius is of 200,000 feet, or you can just use the ruler here and see it comes out to roughly about 33-ish nautical miles or so. Now, lately in DCS, by default, when you set search and engage in zone, the constraints for targets for these MiGs to engage is automatically set to helicopters. So you need to change this unless you want your helicopter pilots to have a very bad day. So we'll uncheck helicopters, we'll check airplanes here, and then we'll uncheck bombers. In my experience so far, in terms of tuning the AI, tankers and AWACS aircraft tend to fall into the category of bombers here in the back end of the DCS AI. So we uncheck that so that way we can have a check against the AI going off and killing all of our enablers and ruining our mission, of course. So once we have that set, that is good to rock and roll. And please keep in mind, this is our most important option when it comes to constraining the AI. So we are going to bring this all the way up to the top of our list here. Now, we have a bunch of additional options that we can add to our AI here to make them fly and feel more realistic. And a lot of these options are pretty new to DCS, and you may not have seen them so far. So in no particular order here, we're going to hit a new task here, and then instead of type perform or start en route task, we're going to go down to set options. Most of our additional options here are going to be under set option. The first action we want to take, kind of going from top to bottom here, is we're going to go ahead and set our enemy flight's formation. Now, when it comes to usual historical Soviet-type formations that a lot of Middle Eastern countries, Eastern Bloc, and of course Soviet flights will use, is a lot of very close flying together while being vectored around by a GCI to engage your blue players. So we'll go ahead and set our formation here to World War II Fighter Vic, and we'll set it to close 30 meters by 30 meters. Again, you've got lots of options here you can work with, and you can go ahead and choose your favorite here. But this one I tend to think mimics Soviet typical formations pretty well. Now, the formation option here doesn't need to be all the way up at the top. The AI will always constrain to the formation no matter where it is in your list. So not super important to have that way up at the top. And especially if you have aircraft air starting, they're going to go through this list before they even spawn in. And then when they spawn in, everything will be set. So the formation can be down at the bottom there. We'll add in our next option here, action. We're going to go down the list here, RTB on bingo fuel. This is another very important one because in the past, before this was recently added to DCS, the AI would suicidally engage blue players or blue AI until they were killed. There was no way to really get the AI to disengage and go home without some rather more complex trickery in the background. I'm going to set RTB on bingo, ignore air-to-air refueling, because of course MiG-29As don't have air-to-air refueling probes, so that's set and good to go. And I'm going to bring this up to the top of my list and bring it down underneath search and engage in zone there. Our next option, coming down the list here, is RTB on out of ammo. This is again going to give the AI another out to disengage from the fight and try to fly home. Very important, especially when it comes to trying to make the AI a heck of a lot less suicidal. And of course, this is going to change depending on the aircraft type you have, as well as the era, as well as the task that you've given that AI. For today, we're going to say air-to-air missiles, and we're going to have them disengage when they're out of medium-range air-to-air missiles. If, say, you've only got MiG-21s, you might want to set that to short-range air-to-air missiles, but I want these MiGs to shoot their Alamos at me as far away as they possibly can, and then when they are out of those missiles, I want them to say, uh-oh, it's time to go home. So that's really important there, so we're going to bring that up to the top of our list and make sure that it is once again underneath search and engage in zone. The next option I'm going to set, again under set options, and coming on down the list, is going to be restrict jettison. This is going to come into play with kind of trying to reduce some of the rather UFO-iness of the DCS AI by putting a whole bunch of extra weight and a whole bunch of extra drag on our AI MiG-29s here, and make them fly and feel a little bit more realistic when it comes to engaging them past the merge in a dogfight. So we'll go ahead and bring these all the way up. Our next option here is going to be, coming on down the list, restrict afterburner. We're going to check that box there, and of course bring it up to the top of our list, and bring it down underneath restricted jettison. Restrict afterburner is going to restrict the AI from using their afterburners as they maneuver around for setting up for the engagement, as well as they fly through their various waypoints. This has two effects on the AI. Number one, it's going to prevent them from running themselves out of fuel very, very quickly, which in the past was an issue for legacy DCS AI, where you'd set up a nice AI flight and they'd run out of fuel, a third of the way through it because they were just flying around in full afterburner the whole time. This is going to restrict that. It's also going to restrict the AI's ability to use their afterburners before the merge, so that way they can have their performance nerfed yet again on top of that restrict jettison. And it's just going to make the AI feel a lot less UFO-y. Now, please keep in mind that once the AI has decided, okay, I am in an air-to-air engagement, I'm about to merge, I'm about to get into a dogfight, this will be overridden and the AI will start to use their afterburners again. But it does make for a more realistic feeling engagement because prior to the merge, they're not going to be using that afterburner. So these MiGs aren't going to be coming into the merge at, say, Mach 1.2 or something like that. So this can be very, very helpful. Next, option we're going to set is going to be Disengage and RTB after formation loss. Now, this is going to make the AI act a lot more human-like, because instead of just throwing themselves headlong into combat, if, say, you're able to get a really nice BVR shot off and one of the aircraft in their formation explodes, the rest of the guys in the formation could be like, oh geez, this is not going well. Let's go ahead and RTB at this point so that way we also don't die. Now, so we can see here that there is a number here for losses. So because we have a 2-ship of MiG-29s, we're setting this to losses of 1. So when one of the MiG-29s dies, the other will turn around and run away for home. Now, let's say if you had a larger number of aircraft in your flight, you could, of course, bring this number up to, say, half the flight dying in a 4-ship or 3/4 of the flight dying in a 4-ship. But of course, for today, we'll set that to 1. Bring this up to the top once again. Another option here that can be very interesting, especially when it comes to making Eastern Bloc aircraft feel a lot more realistic in an air-to-air scenario, is the radar using option. We have a bunch of different options here for when it comes to making these MiG-29s act a lot more realistic. We want to set this to use for attack only. Now, in real life, of course, a MiG-29 pilot is going to be talking to his GCI and using data link if it's a Soviet aircraft, or simply just talking to his GCI and then only turning on his radar at the last minute when it comes to actually queuing up a target and firing an Alamo at it. And this is going to make things a lot more interesting and a lot more realistic, and probably something that a lot of your human pilots in your multiplayer missions are not going to be expecting. Now, one thing to be very, very careful here of when you do set radar using use for attack only or use for search if required, is you're going to have an additional unit on the red side that can be the eyes and ears for our MiG pilots. So that's going to be an EWR station or an A-50 mainstay AWACS aircraft. So speaking of AWACS aircraft, why don't we go ahead and set up an AWACS for the red side and the blue side here. On the blue side, we'll go ahead and select a new aircraft. We'll go ahead and go to Combined Task Forces Blue, E3A Sentry, and we'll bring him up to 30,000 feet. His speed, we'll go give him Mach 0.75. That should be good. We'll add another waypoint here, and then we'll add a option for perform task orbit, set him to a racetrack, 447, so that way he stays at Mach 0.75, and that should be set and good to go. Some additional options when it comes to tuning the red side AI, even for your enablers such as AWACS and tankers, are to set some additional options here that are going to be under the perform command. And if you set them to invisible, this doesn't make them visually invisible to players in your mission. This makes them invisible to the AI. The AI can't see them, so therefore they will not engage them. This is really important if you don't want, say, your red side AI going off willy-nilly and shooting down all your tankers and AWACSs and things like that, in case something weird happens in your mission and things don't go quite to plan. Another option that I like to set for almost all of my enablers, especially my tankers, is going to be the unlimited fuel option there. So that's set and ready to go. So now why don't we just go ahead and copy this AWACS and bring it over to the other side. So I'll go ahead and copy and paste that AWACS there, and we'll bring him over to Combined Task Forces Red, and we'll make him an A50 here. We'll go ahead and check all of our options here. All of our options are looking good and ready to go. So at this point, we are set and ready to fly through our mission. Guys, just want to make sure that we double check and double emphasize that if we are using the restriction on the radar usage of our enemy aircraft, we have to have AWACS or EWR on the other side in order for them to be the eyes and ears and give those GCI or AIC commands to our red side MiGs here. Okay, so at this point, we are set and ready to actually fly through our mission. So why don't we go ahead and jump on in. Alright guys, so we are in the cockpit of our FA-18 here near the Musandam Peninsula on the Persian Gulf map. And we'll go ahead and start off by setting up our cockpit for our air-to-air engagement. So to make things easy for today, I'm just going to set my dispensers to bypass. I'm going to go ahead and bring my jet to air-to-air combat mode by selecting my AMRAMs on my stick there. I'm going to preset my targeting pod to make my targeting pod a lot more useful when it comes to VIDing targets. And I'm going to go ahead and bring my radar over to TWS mode. We can start to see that we're both getting PPLIs as well as radar contacts from our MiG-29s out there. And we can see that is borne out and evidenced by one of the MiG-29s turning hostile, meaning we have two sources of IFF for that aircraft. Next, we'll go ahead and set our SA page on the bottom there. We'll set waypoint 1, and we should be good to rock and roll. External lights are off. Alright, next thing I like to do is when I'm in Twiz mode, I almost always have my radar in automatic mode in order to ensure that my target stays within the scan volume of my radar. And we'll bring our HMD on, because of course that will always help us out. Now, one thing to notice right off the bat here, and we can see this both on our SA page and on our radar scope here, is we do not have any RWR contacts from our MiG-29s. They are not illuminating their radar, as a real MiG pilot wouldn't be doing if he was flying and searching for NATO aircraft to take a shot at. And we can see out here that the AI is not just simply ignoring what's going on, they are actively starting to maneuver for our engagement. And that's because the AI in the background here is talking to their A-50 AWACS and getting vectored in to intercept me here. And we can see they are going the speed of heat to try and take a shot at me. So we better start to respond pretty quick here. So one thing I'm going to do right off the bat here is I'm going to go ahead and crank off to the left or to the right, so that way I can reduce the closure rate between me and the enemy MiGs. So that way I can give myself a little bit of extra time in my BVR timeline to set up for a shot on these MiGs. So we'll go ahead and come on over to the left-hand side. Because we're flying a Navy jet, there's no such thing as right-hand turn, so I'm almost always cranking off to the left. And we can see, of course, our MiGs out there off to our right-hand side. And again, this is just going to give us a lot more time in order to react to these MiGs. And we can see on the F10 map here, they have shifted their heading and they are still nose on. And we can see that corresponded in both our B scope as well as on our SA page. So even though we're not getting an RWR contact from our raw equipment, they are definitely still out there and are definitely being vectored around by that AWACS. Alright, so they're getting pretty close here. 27 nautical miles. In my BVR timeline in my head, the range at which a MiG-29 is going to probably take an R-27 shot is probably going to be somewhere around 25 nautical miles. So I better go ahead and start to get nose on to respond to these guys, so that way I can take a shot. And Fox 3. And boom, I was pretty right there. So right at about 23 nautical miles, the MiG-29s were told by their AIC and the A-50 to turn their radars on to actually take an R-27 shot. So as I'm going off to the right-hand side here, I'm going to continue my crank to the right and probably skate off to the east here, so that way I can hopefully not get shot by one of these guys. And we're currently at gimbals of 050, so we're keeping our MiG-29 here on the very edge of our radar screen, so that way we can support the missile for at least 6 more seconds or so. You can see the MiGs have still turned back into us here on the SA page as well as on the B scope. And we can see on our targeting pod here, and this is why it's really important to carry a targeting pod, when you're flying an air-to-air mission, we can see that MiG took a shot. And of course, our RWR has not told us the MiG has taken a shot. It hasn't given us a launch warning because it's going to take a couple of seconds for that radar energy to come from the MiG into our aircraft, into the antennas for the RWR system, those signals to be processed, and then give you a launch warning. So it can definitely be a bit hectic in the cockpit, and that's why being able to visually see when a MiG takes a shot is very important. We can see that our AMRAAM is now active, so we are good to go fully defensive here. I'm going to go ahead and go EW on, pop out some chaff, and start to go fully defensive around the backside. There's my MiGs over there. We can see they're separated vertically. Taking a look at what's happening here, it looks like this MiG is about to be splashed. Yep. Boom. There we go. So now, the second MiG is probably going to bug out. Now, the option that set our MiGs to bug out depends on how close they are to an enemy aircraft and whether or not they're engaged in active combat. If, say, they're past the merged, engaged in active combat, they are not going to automatically just disengage and fly away and be stupid. They're going to ensure that they are going to defend themselves first and then disengage when they get an opening for it. So because we're pretty far away, and our own AWACS is telling us to go ahead and flow cold to set up for subsequent engagements, I bet you our MiG friend here is going to turn and call it a day. Looking at the additional aircraft here, we can see that he is turning and is going to go ahead and head home. Now, in testing all of these different permutations of options and things, if we'd gotten into a really good BVR engagement there and they had fired all of their Alamos, they would have also retired and RTB'd after firing those Alamos. One thing that is a little bit weird is the AI tends to descend to 2,000 feet right away and then climb back up. My guess is that's them trying to simulate an enemy pilot wanting to dive to the deck to then fly away on the deck to make it harder to lock him or fire a missile at him due to the kinematics of the missiles, as well as ground clutter blocking radar returns, things of that nature. So I'm not quite sure how I feel about that so far. I wish that was an option that was available to us to change. So let's go ahead and head back to the mission editor one more time and talk about how we can adapt this type of situation for a Cold War scenario if you're flying F4s or in the future F100s or Mirage F1s, things of that nature. Okay guys, we're back in the mission editor here, and I wanted to show you guys just a couple of additional little options you can do here to kind of tune the scenario more towards an early Cold War type scenario. So one thing we need to do, of course, is change over our aircraft type here over on the bad guy side over to the MiG-21. So we'll go ahead and search 21 there. There's our MiG-21 BIS option for our aircraft. But keep in mind that the MiG-21 BIS is a very, very late model MiG-21 that has additional systems and additional weapons capability added to it, and crucially IR as well as chaff countermeasures that they can then pop out to spoof missiles that are coming at them. Early model MiG-21s that were exported to, say, Middle Eastern countries for our Yom Kippur-like scenario here were very early model MiG-21s that were degraded quite substantially and didn't have things like IR or radar countermeasures available to them and very limited weapons carriage capability. So let's go ahead and start to tune this flight of aircraft for that early Cold War scenario in mind. So when you change over your aircraft type here for your particular flight of aircraft, it's going to jumble up all of the options that we previously set in terms of their order. Thankfully, it keeps them all here, but it is going to jumble up the order, and it is going to reset the default cap-A for all those default options when it comes to the combat air patrol task. So we're definitely going to want to delete that. We're going to want to bring our search and engage in zone option up to the top once again, and we'll start to bring our additional options back up to the top underneath search and engage zone once again here. When it comes to the RTB out of ammo option that we've just moved up to the top here, we're going to edit that and change that to short range air-to-air missiles. So that way when our MiG-21s here run out of their K-13 or R3S or however you want to say the ATOL-B type missile, they are going to RTB once they're out of those. Of course, radar using for attack only is going to be very important when it comes to these more early style Soviet aircraft, because that kind of Soviet tactic we talked about earlier applies even more so to aircraft like the MiG-21 and MiG-23 as well as others. Now, you guys might be thinking, Spud, this is a lot of stuff to set for each individual flight of aircraft. And that's why I always copy and paste flights of aircraft, because it will retain all these options. You just need to reset the order in which they are set up for. That should be set and ready to go. Oh, another thing to keep in mind here is when you do change the aircraft type, it will reset this air-to-air missile attack ranges. I'm going to go ahead and set that to max range. Again, doesn't matter so much in terms of realism when it comes to the short range K-13 or R3 type missiles you're going to want on your MiG-21s, but it is still something to be aware of in the future when you guys are setting up multiple flights of AI aircraft. So next, we're going to go ahead and change up the loadout of these MiG-21s. We're going to set the loadout to 2 R3Ss and a centerline drop tank. The drop tank is there, of course, to help nerf the kinetic capabilities of our MiG-21. We'll go ahead and set his skin over to our fictional Pirani Air Force in order to have our omnipresent fictional bad guys fighting against us. We're going to make sure that he doesn't have the countermeasures pod attached to the aircraft there. But you'll notice over here, by default, the aircraft is always loaded with 18 chaff and 40 flares, and they will definitely use those unless you tell the AI not to use them. The way we tell the AI not to use flares is we add yet another option, set option, and then chaff and flare using will set to never use. This is important because those more degraded variants of MiG-21s flown by Middle Eastern countries, Syria, Egypt, Iraq, etc., were delivered without the ability to use chaff and flares. And of course, if you're simulating, say, MiG-21 F-13s or MiG-21 PFs, things of that nature, they're only going to be able to carry say 2 of those R3Ss at a time. And at this point, we have changed over everything to be more realistic when it comes to a early Cold War type of scenario. If you want to go one step further, we can also change over from, instead of an AWACS and an AIC talking to our red AI, we can turn them into a GCI. So we'll go ahead and delete the AWACS. We'll come down to Keshem Island Airfield and we'll add an EWR radar. So we'll go ahead and go to ground units, combined task force is red. We've already got it set here to an EWR. We'll go ahead and pop that guy in. And now our MiG-21 AIs will be talking to the GCI AIs in the EWR unit here. So that way they can keep their radars off, but still find our F4 flight we're going to set up. Keep in mind, guys, that if you don't set a red side sensor and AWACS and EWR, things of that nature, and you have the radar usage only when ready to attack set in the options, you are going to have a bunch of AI that can't find and can't engage any of your blue side flights of aircraft, whether they are human or AI, it doesn't matter. So make sure that you're always double checking all of that good stuff, and we will edit our F-18 flight over to a F-4 flight here. Make sure that we can use combat tree because combat tree is super cool, of course. And for our loadout, we're of course going to go for an air-to-air centric loadout. We'll carry some AIM-9Js and some AIM-7Fs. And we'll go over to my favorite skin that I've ever made that I know that a lot of you guys really like as well here, and that is the Cheetahs of the Hijaz skin for our F4, and we are set and ready to fly. So let's go ahead and fly through this little scenario. Alrighty guys, we're now in the office of our F4 Phantom, to fly through this simple little air-to-air combat scenario that we set up here in the mission editor from the Cold War perspective. So we'll first go ahead and set up the cockpit of our F4 as always. Make sure our master arm is on, our select jettison is set to select stores. We are good to go there. Bring the autopilot off, use the pinky switch to select our aim 7s, and we are being told from our AWACS that we have a couple of MiGs out there on our nose. So we'll go ahead and come on downstairs a little bit, so that way we can get a low to high aspect on them with our radar, and we'll just continue flying on out here, and we can start to see that our combat tree is picking up some MiG activity on our nose. Looks like there's 2 of them. And once again, here on our RWR, we are not getting any emissions from those MiGs as we would see in real life. Those MiGs are only going to turn on their radars once they're ready to engage us with those K-13 missiles or with their gun. And so once again, we got 2 MiGs via combat tree and nothing on the RWR scope. We can see here on the F10 map that these MiGs are communicating with the EWR site because they are definitely maneuvering to start engaging me. We've got a high-low split, front-back split as well, so they are definitely going for it. Keep in mind that the tuning option for restricting Afterburner, it sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. It really depends on the alert level of the AI here. It can be more useful for making sure the AI doesn't blow through their fuel, but it can be useful in certain scenarios for keeping the kinetic abilities of your MiGs down a little bit. So at this point, we know that the MiGs are out there, and it looks like they're coming through about 42-ish nautical miles. We know from our AWACS that we've got a high-low split out in front of us. So looking at our altitude, we're at about 12,000. We'll go ahead and bring it down just a hair more. We've got our aim 7s selected. Okay, they're coming through 25 nautical miles at this point, so we'll go ahead and select bore sight. And we're looking for the MiGs visually at this point. Starting to sweep our nose across the sky a little bit here.
Roger that. Roger.
And we'll go ahead and have Jester return to a usual scan pattern. And at this point, we're starting to get eaten up a little bit. There we go. So we'll go ahead and get the nose onto our bandit here. There we go. That's a good return. We'll lock him.
Okay, lock. 1 potato, 2 potato, 3 potato, 4 potato, fire.
And box 1 on this guy. We got lucky and were able to take a shot. And we go. Splash. Got him. So that's set and good to go.
2 miles.
We've got another fish bed here. So this is where it could potentially be interesting. Now, we just splashed one of the MiGs, so it could be that this guy is going to elect to bug out, but it looks like he's still in burner and he's still coming nose on hot to us. So in the AI's opinion, they may be too close to us in order to have an opportunity to bug out, but we'll see in just a few seconds here. So we'll go ahead and go to caged mode and auto acquisition mode, and we'll select our sidewinders. So at this point, it looks like the MiG has elected to stay with the engagement, or actually maybe not. It looks like he's turning away and trying to escape. So we'll go ahead and jettison our stores just in case he decides to mix it up with us. And of course, I've lost sight of him. There he is. And let's take a look. So it definitely looks like that he might be running for the hills, but this is realistic. A lot of the very good HUD footage or gun cam footage you see from, say, Israeli or American F4s or even F-105s, F-100s, things like that, the MiGs are on their way running away after their boom and zoom type of attack, and they don't want to actually mix it up in a furball with the American or Israeli F-4s. Box 2, and splash. Got him as he was trying to run for the water. So while it might seem like kind of cheating and making the AI too easy, it is actually more realistic than having, say, AI that just doesn't care at all about dying and wants to stay in the fight until the very bitter end. He just elected to bug out there a little too late, and he really should have actually merged with me and turned with me. But guys, I hope that this video was illuminating for you guys and helps you out when it comes to tuning the AI for more interesting, realistic, and immersive scenarios that are, of course, also a lot more fun. So please leave a like and a subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Fly safe out there and enjoy this beautiful game.